your daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE students. You can watch this lesson real-time on Television Jamaica's YouTube channel or on onespotmedia.com. We also are live on Music 99 and gojamaica.com. If you have questions on today's subject, CSEC Principles of Business, you can send them in to Television Jamaica's Facebook page or Instagram at television_Jamaica. Today, we will be taking you through the steps of resolving conflicts in the workplace. I am Kayan Johnson. All right. Now, in resolving conflicts in the workplace, conflicts really exist everywhere. And we also have them in the workplace. We have diverse personalities. We have people who have difference in beliefs, people who have difference in religion, political affiliation, and we also have people really being passionate about their own personal interest. Now, when we talk about conflicts in the workplace, I'm sure you can think of some reasons there may be conflicts that may arise in the workplace. And today we're going to explore a few of those reasons. We're also going to explore how do we resolve these conflicts. So let us take a look at our objectives for today. We will be identifying the potential sources of conflicts within an organization. We will also be outlining some strategies that are used by employees to somewhat gain an upper hand during periods of conflict. We'll also be looking at what are some strategies used by employers to gain an upper hand during the period of conflict. And we'll also be looking at how do we resolve these conflicts? How do we come to an agreement? Employers and employees. Now, as we go into our first objective, identifying sources of conflict in an organization, let us look at the CSEC question. And I want you to make note of the questions, and we will come back to them at the end of our session. Now, this past paper question is from 2008, and paper 2, and it's question 4B. So the brain tease question comes from the past papers today, and here's what the question says. So it says, the shop steward of a factory, you gave management notice that the workers would take industrial action in their interest in really satisfying some of the demands that they have. Your question is to identify 2 reasons which might have caused the workers to plan that industrial action. You may want to list 4 activities other than striking, of course, that can be classified as an industrial action. And you will be required to state 2 actions which management can take to prevent planned industrial actions. So, and you'll notice that each question each part of the question is worth 4 marks, and we'll identify how is it that we can best respond to these questions if it is that you see them again. Okay, now let us start out by first and foremost defining conflict. What is conflict? I know that you've had conflicts on a daily basis. Now and again, you might have conflicts because disagreement is really unavoidable when we have persons who share difference in personalities, among other things. Now, conflict may be described as a clash of interest, ideas, or objectives between 2 or more individuals, especially in this case within an organization. It may be between employees or among employees. It may be among managers or between managers. And at the same time, it may also be within different levels of the organization. You may have employees being dissatisfied and they don't feel as if their issues are being heard. We may have managers who have certain policies in place that they may not see to want to change. There are different, based on especially leadership styles and well, the policies of the organization. So we're going to explore a little bit of what are some of these factors that may cause conflicts in the workplace. Now, let us look at a few of them. Conflict in the workplace can arise due to poor working conditions, pay disputes, and don't we always see this in the media? Everybody wants more pay in their pockets. Everybody wants to live a better life and be able to pay the bills and take a vacation and take care of their kids. Pay disputes is one of the conflicts that may arise in organizations more often. All right. We also have sexual harassment may cause conflicts, and you might hear, especially with the Me Too movement, this may be in the media over the most recent years. Now, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the various causes of conflict or sources of conflict. So, more schools not out after the break.
COVID-19 tip. Protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ.
COVID-19 tip. Protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ.
COVID-19 tip. Protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ.
COVID-19 tip. Protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ.
COVID-19 tip. Protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other.
Welcome back to Schools Not Out, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE subjects. We've been looking at resolving conflicts in the workplace, and we were talking about earlier the sources of conflicts in the workplace, and we mentioned poor working conditions may cause conflicts in the workplace, disputes in salary or sexual harassment. Let's see what are some of the other conditions that might really give rise to conflicts in the workplace. Job security issues. We may have an unfair dismissal, and sometimes you also hear of this in the media. We have persons who feel as if they were unfairly dismissed, or sometimes we have these persons seeking some resolution, especially through the Ministry of Labour and other sources. We also have gossip, which is something that really is a real thing that really happens in the workplace, sometimes more than we would hope, and it really is one of those things that give rise to conflict. We have verbal abuse also, lack of communication, and industrial unrest. And there are other things, there are other sources of conflict that we have not really listed here. So this list is not complete, but these are some of the common sources of conflict. Sometimes we have differences in sexual orientation rather, that really may cause some type of conflict. We may have difference in religion or political beliefs among other things. Okay, so let us look a little bit further into the topic and move on to our second objective. So we're going to be outlining some of the strategies that are used by both employers and employees to gain the upper hand during periods of conflict. And to get started, we're going to look at strategies used by employees to gain the upper hand in conflict. Because if you think back on the last conflict you had, many times people really try to really gain the upper hand so that their needs are met, or their point of view is brought across, or they end up being the satisfied party within a conflict. Therefore, let us explore some of these strategies that have been used by employees to somewhat gain an upper hand in conflicts. So the first one we'll be looking at today, we call it work to rule. Now, it is the hope of every employer that employees really go above and beyond the call of duty, give it their best shot, work overtime. They're reliable. You can always count on them to really go outside of their stipulated duties when called upon. Now, work to rule is one strategy used by employees to put up a fight within conflicts. And this happens where employees report to work, but they only complete the tasks that they have been assigned. So they work strictly on just jobs that have been stipulated in their job description. And they really restrict what tasks they put their hands to. So work to rule is one method that employees use to gain some sort of an upper hand in conflict in the workplace. Let's look at another one. Go slow. Now, this is where employees, yes, they show up at work, but they deliberately go at a slower pace, not exerting too much energy to really get the job done. So work that they could complete within a day, they may stretch it out a little longer. And it really is not these strategies that are used by employees. It is sometimes not really favorable, especially for the company on a whole, especially if it is that we have like a production process and they are really hampering the production process or really acting in such a manner that it really impedes on the production within that organization. But when people are dissatisfied, you can expect certain actions if it is that they feel as if they're not heard. And as long as these actions are legal, and these are some of the ways in which you can really express as a worker your dissatisfaction, and especially if you're unionized, right? So we have a go slow strategy that is sometimes used. We have an overtime ban. And remember, I said earlier, overtime is sometimes what we used to earn a little bit more on our salary, but in some cases, we're not necessarily paid for overtime. So think about even teachers, and I can relate as a teacher. Our work doesn't end, if the school day ends at 2 o'clock, our work don't really end at 2 o'clock. We work sometimes late into the night and early in the mornings before we start our day. So overtime ban is where employees really refuse to work overtime. So if you used to stay behind at work and try to really help out, not necessarily to the benefit of getting any overtime pay, but you are just committed to your job and you want to give a little bit more. If we have an overtime ban imposed or agreed upon by employees, they may decide to, as the workday ends, you might see them start packing up. If the workday ends at 2 o'clock, they start packing up at 5 minutes to 2. And as it strikes 2 o'clock, everybody gets up and leave. So overtime restriction is one strategy that is also used whenever we have workplace conflicts. Okay, calling in sick, a sick out. Unionized workers may all call in sick or take a sick leave at the same time. And calling in sick is really one of those strategies that cannot really be used by especially essential workers. It is not really advised that essential workers call in sick altogether, but it is something that really happens when we have conflict in the workplace. We have employees trying to get their grosses settled. So this is one method they might use. So they might all try to get sick leaves from the doctor's office or offices to provide proof that they were sick so as not to really have a dip in their pay, even though it sometimes involves dishonesty about being sick. But it is one of those methods that have been used by employees. We also have a sit-in. Now, a sit-in happens when workers report to work, yes, but they just sit at their desks idle for the entire day. But they may refuse to really complete any assigned tasks. So yes, they show up and they clock in, but they refuse to accomplish any objectives that have been set out for the day. All right, we also have different forms of other different forms of strike actions. For example, a walkout where the organizations may refuse to return to work. The members of the organization may refuse to return to work, and this is one of the methods that employees also use. Okay, now that we have looked at some of the methods that employees have used, we're going to go into some of the methods that employers have also used in terms of conflicts to gain the upper hand. Okay, so can you describe any strategies used by employers to gain the upper hand in workplace conflicts? Can you name any? All right, think about it. And you can also text in your responses using the social media handles that we provided earlier. All right, so let us look at some of these strategies that are used by employers to gain the upper hand. Now, one of these strategies is a lockout. And as I've said the word, or you're reading, you may have a pretty good idea of what a lockout involves. So a lockout involves employers stopping employees who are a part of the dispute or who have an interest in industrial action from entering the business premises so that they cannot disrupt production. Okay, so this is one method that has been used by the employers within an organization. And in any case where we have the organization, really the production process or the services provided are essential, or we may want to have uninterrupted service, the employers may hire temporary labor to fill in that gap if workers decide to especially if they decide to have extended periods of a strike, or especially a stay-at-home strike. All right. An employer may employ other workers on a temporary or short-term basis to replace those who are a part of the dispute process, especially if they have not turned up for duties. We have a refusal to negotiate with employees or their representatives. And usually this is one strategy, despite it being used by employers to gain the upper hand. It is one strategy that really sometimes pushes the conflict to a point where it gets more heated. So refusal to negotiate with employees or their representatives. The hope may be that employees will end their disputes, be frustrated, and stop their strike action or industrial action, so if they realize that their employers are unwilling to negotiate, some people really want to keep their job despite them being dissatisfied. So this strategy used by employers is really in an effort to frustrate the persons who are a part of the dispute. For example, workers may find it difficult to continue taking strike action and lose pay, especially if they work in an organization where if they don't clock in certain hours, they don't get paid, forcing themselves and their families into hardship. So this may be one really chain reaction that might happen. So in order to prevent that, we have employees really ending the industrial action and just moving forward with their work. All right, and one last tactic that may be used by the employers is what we refer to as scare tactics. So there may be threats of dismissal or disciplinary action against those who choose to really usurp. They may see it as a usurp of authority or usurping authority. So they may actually use the scare tactics of threatening to dismiss or take disciplinary action against those who take part in the industrial action. All right. So let us look back at our brain tease question. So far, you should be able to answer questions A and B. Question A asks us to simply identify 2 reasons that might have caused the workers to plan industrial action. And do you remember some of them? We mentioned sexual harassment. We mentioned a dispute of salaries. We mentioned a few more. So those are 2 that might really push workers to want to take up some industrial action within their organization. For activities other than striking that can be classified as some form of industrial action, remember we mentioned some of them. We may have sitting, we may have a work to rule, we may have calling in sick, right? And there are so many others that we have not really mentioned that you can do further readings on. So now we're going to explore the answers for question C, part C of the question. So let us take a look at our next objective. So we're going to be describing some of the strategies for resolving conflicts within an organization. And I know that at this point, some persons may be thinking that, you know, there are so many strategies that we have used in trying to resolve conflicts in the workplace, and sometimes you really get a positive thing out of it. Workers become more satisfied, even though all your demands might not be met. But let us look at some of these strategies that we can really use to bridge the gap where there lies conflict within organizations. And on that note, may I just wish everyone a happy International Workers' Day. So today's International Workers' Day, and I hope that all workers feel satisfied with the jobs that they perform, and you are not threatening industrial actions. All right, let's move on to some of these strategies now. These are some strategies that have been used to resolve disputes in the workplace, and these are just 4 strategies. So let's look at the first one. The first one is mediation. The second one is arbitration. We have conciliation and trade unions. Now let us start out by looking at mediation and what does mediation involve? Why is it different from other forms of conflict resolution in the workplace? So this is where we have a party that is not affiliated to either or doesn't really have any allegiance to either parties in the conflict. So we say they are neutral third parties. We refer to them as mediators. And a neutral third party is brought in to listen to the grievances of both parties involved in the dispute, and they aim to really facilitate the communication among those who are involved in the dispute and develop an understanding between the aggrieved parties. Now, it is very important to know what the mediation process involves. So the mediation process is somewhat different from other forms of conflict resolution, because in this case, the mediator, the neutral party that is, does not, even though they assume an advisory role, and they really provide some recommendations, they do not they're not really involved in agreeing in any form of agreement. What they do, they supervise the process and help each party understand the disagreements that they have. So the final responsibility for settling the dispute really rests in the hands of the parties that are involved in the dispute. And in this case, what we're talking about is employers and employees. So they will decide which possible solution will suit their circumstances. Now, again on mediation, it is important to remember now that the mediator does not solve the conflict for the parties. The mediator only listens to help them to develop an understanding, acts like a referee, really, and tries to assist both parties to communicate their grosses in a respectful manner, and so that each party understands completely the problems that one party has and the situations that might be, especially from the perspective of an employer, that might prevent them from really meeting all the needs or satisfying all the needs that employees may want to really attain those targets from the dispute. So let's move on to arbitration. So within arbitration is the second strategy that we can use to attempt to resolve conflicts. And this is where we have a third party again. But this third party we call him or her an arbiter. So this arbiter's responsibility is to bring really both parties together. So it's a third party which is brought in to listen to the grievances of both parties involved in the dispute. And both parties agree beforehand to accept and uphold the decisions made by the arbiter after he or she really listens to the case. So I think by now you should have formulated in your minds what may be the difference between the arbitration process and the mediation process that we mentioned earlier. Remember now that the mediator really acts like a referee, really to ensure that there is no really unprofessional behavior, and that the parties each are allowed like the right amount of time to really formulate their grouse, or to put forward their disagreement, or to put forward whatever information they come to the meeting with. While the arbitration process is a little bit similar, but it may have a difference where both parties going into that meeting agree to, after the arbiter hears both claims or either sides of the dispute, they agree to accept the decision made by that person, that third party who is intervening in that meeting. So let's look further at the arbitration process. So after the arbiter who has heard their issues, after that, he or she makes a ruling or passes some judgment by declaring a means of settlement. That decision is legally binding on the aggrieved parties, which means that it is enforceable by law. So in this process, we do have a resolution being put forward by the arbiter, and though it may be debated on, it depends on the level of the conflict or the level of the power that has been really given to that arbiter. Both parties may have to agree upon the neutral parties' input in the arbitration process. So again, the arbiter who comes in and listens to both sides of the parties, that person then solves the conflict for them, which is legally binding, and we say that means enforceable by law once more. Okay, and trade unions is the fourth method that we really, or avenue that we really take whenever we are attempting to resolve conflicts. Now, trade unions, these are bodies that have been formed to really act on behalf of the members within an organization, or members of a similar profession, or members who have some things in common. So, for example, we have a trade union, especially like for teachers, who really represents us if it is that we do have some disagreement with any of those sources of conflicts that we mentioned earlier. So the trade union uses a process we call collective bargaining to negotiate wages and working conditions with employers. So that's a team that really represents workers. So instead of workers really going individually to really express their grievances, at the risk of really losing their jobs, they may take their issue to the trade unions who represent their interest. So a trade union is good to be a part of a trade union, especially if it is that you get to the point where you have so many disagreements or so many issues within the workplace, and you don't want to risk stepping up and saying something that may not go well. So instead, you may be unionized, come together because we are stronger in numbers, and have a trade union represent all the parties. So collective bargaining is the negotiation of wages and other conditions, of course, of employment for a set of employees by an organized body. Now, here are some examples of some trade unions in Jamaica. We have, for example, the Jamaica Airline Pilots Association, JTA. We have the Nurses Association of Jamaica, the Police Officers Association of Jamaica. We have the Jamaica Medical Doctors Association. We also have the Jamaica Civil Services Association. And there are other trade unions in Jamaica as well. And there are others that may not be on this list that you may be able to recall. So what are some other trade unions that you know that exist in Jamaica that are not on this list? Okay, so you can reply, text in your answers through the social media handles that we discussed earlier or mentioned earlier. Okay, so let us go back to our question. Do you remember the question that we asked earlier? It's part 3, it's the third part of our brain tease. So we're going to just go back through the questions that we asked earlier. The third question asks us to state 2 actions which management can take to prevent the planned industrial action. Now, you might not have gotten any response from the latter part of the topic, but what do you think? What are 2 actions that management can really take to prevent planned industrial action? Maybe if it is that we have a trade union going forth and representing workers' interest, we can actually, through that process, come to an agreement and settle the dispute before it escalates to the point of any form of industrial action. We may also use the other 4 conflict resolution strategies, or 3 other conflict resolution strategies, before it escalates to the point of a strike or other forms of industrial action. So we mentioned arbitration earlier. That's one process that we can take where, as we said earlier, we meet with an arbiter, and we agree that after expressing our issues and expressing our side of the dispute, we agree to what the arbiter has discussed and really put forward, and it becomes legally binding. We also mentioned that, so it says state 2, but there are 2 others that we could have used as well. We could also use a mediation process. So if it is that we have found like there's an arising dispute or there's a concern within the organization that could really be blown on a wider scale, we try to tame it through the mediation process. And this is where we, as we say, we have a mediator or a neutral party that steps in and acts like a referee, as I said before, really listening to both parties and ensuring that there is some form of disciplined conduct, ethical practices are involved in the mediation process. And there are others, of course, that we may not have listed here, but at least you should know, have an understanding of how you would answer this question if it is that you had received this question in an exam or under exam conditions. Okay, so let us look back at some of the other brain teasers and let's hear your response. So earlier, we had another question that we can go to. Let's see what that question was. I think the question that we had asked earlier is if you could describe any strategies used by employers, and this question might have been repeated based on the CSEC question that we asked earlier. So it asks you to describe any strategies employers might use to gain the upper hand in the workplace process or in the workplace conflicts. So instead of just listing, remember now a description involves giving a definition. So what do we define? So what we may start by defining is conflicts, and you may then list what these strategies may be, and then you expound on these strategies. So that is how we would take on the description process. The description process would involve, let us say that we're describing strategies the employers might use to gain upper hand. Okay, so the employees, let's say we're focusing on a lockout, right? And that process involves, preventing workers who are a part of the dispute from coming into our organization and disrupting the production process, all right? What we may have, if it is that you are trying to really do the description, you can mention the definition that I just gave you. And then in addition to that, you can give an example. And that is really effective in your description. Okay, now let's look at another brain tease. Let's see if we have at least one more brain tease before we wrap up. Okay, so I think that's all the brain teasing for today. Let us go back to our objectives. All right, so today we discussed a few things. We discussed identifying potential sources of conflict within an organization. And remember now, we mentioned a few of them, like the dispute about other working conditions. I also mentioned others that were not really listed. For example, differences in, we have conflicts that arise from politics or religious conversations. And that's one thing that we always say, that we do not bring politics or religion discussions in the workplace, because it's something that we can go on and on about. All right, so, and there are many other sources of conflict in the workplace. We spoke about sexual harassment as well earlier. We also spoke about unfair treatment of workers or unfair dismissal of workers. Those might be the sources of conflicts in a particular workplace. In our second objective, let's look at if we attain that objective. Okay, so we were supposed to be able to outline strategies used by employees to gain an upper hand during the period of conflict. And yes, we did. Remember what we mentioned? I know you can recall some of them. Okay, so earlier we spoke about unionized workers may call in sick. We spoke about sitting in or work to rule. And there are other strategies that workers might take in order to really hear their voices. They may have like picketing, or they may go out with placards and go on that form of strike, or we may have persons staying home, right? We also attained objective 3. Let's look if we really achieved that objective. Were we able to outline the strategies used by employers to gain an upper hand during periods of conflict? Yes, we did. Let's hear some of them now. So we mentioned that workers may have a form of a lockout. We also mentioned that workers may actually get replacement workers for persons who are really involved in industrial actions, especially if they decide to stay away from the workplace during that period of time. And we may also have employees trying somewhat of a scare tactic to maybe threatening to lay off employees. And these scare tactics really are used to persuade employees to discontinue their industrial action, because they may be in fear of losing their jobs, losing their income, and having to really go back to the drawing board of finding a job. Okay, and the last thing that we described today were the strategies that we use for resolving conflicts in an organization. And I think we discussed about 3 of them today. We mentioned, what are those three that we mentioned? I know you can remember them because 2 of them are similar, right? And we have one that we mentioned also. We have trade unions, where we have a body representing a group of workers within an organization. We also had mediation, and we also had arbitration. And if there are other methods of resolving conflicts, I know you can name more than what I've just listed, but that's all for today. This will definitely help you in the future when you transition into the work environment. You can catch a repeat of today's lesson on JNN later at 5 p.m. and in Schools Not Out highlights on Saturday between 1 and 4 p.m. It also will be on video on demand on onespotmedia.com. Next up, we have CSEC Theatre Arts.